you so much for meeting with me. I am Santa Elsa, and I'm doing my educational leadership. And this is Lindsay Foley. She's
the Executive Director for HR for Friendswood ISD.
perfect. So Lindsay, from your perspective, what makes a district's personnel system truly effective?
Well, I think it's the layers overall. So what I mean by that is the various position types that we have and the layers of support there. So specifically with teachers, for example, if we were to post that position, we have it posted for that minimum of 10 days. We go through that recruiting process. The teachers know what they need, or the administration knows what they need for that teacher team, specifically whether it's a grade level or a specific department, if you will, at the secondary level. And from that, they start to screen their applicants. So if we were to look at that from the leadership side, we would meet with the campus, we would build a leadership profile, and then create that screening process. And then from there, we would have we would make that hire, but then we would have those layers to provide support and coaching and ensuring the success of that individual employee. So I feel like that we have that for all roles within our district, even from on the auxiliary side for maintenance and drivers and all of them. So I would think that makes us a successful hiring system, as well as for the life of their employment.
I love that. What roles would you say that y'all do, like the leadership profile or something similar in a different capacity for?
I would say that we would do that for any role that requires leadership experience and really wanting to understand what a team means for them, how they lead people, how they lead systems, if you will, to ensure that they're the best fit for the group that we're hiring or the campus we're hiring them for. We've done one for Bales Intermediate. We've done one for the junior high, but we've also done it based on department of which we're hiring for. So for example, before I was hired, Mr. Rohr met with the HR team to see, like, what are the needs and what do y'all think is a successful leader? Like, what do those qualities look like to you? So then that way, when we're developing interview questions, we can plug in some keywords to help us get that information back from them and their answers.
I love that. Perfect. I remember for the athletic director, so it's probably a really similar process.
And in some positions, such as the athletic director, there's so much community involvement within opinions, right? And because we're a school district, we actually did a leadership profile, not just with our athletics department, but also with the community, which was very interesting. And we're asking similar like questions just to see what all stakeholders from your community, parents, your athletic staff and your employees are looking for. We've done the same thing for CTE. Sometimes when it's hard to pull everybody together, we may put it out in a survey format versus face-to-face and almost like a forum. So we've done it in different avenues, but just always ensured that we're getting that feedback so that people feel their voices heard on what their needs are, because they sit in that every day, right?
Absolutely. I love that. So how do you anticipate staffing needs before they become urgent, especially with shifting enrollment or teacher burnout?
So every year we do projections for our enrollment, and we begin doing that in January to know what our needs are going to be for August 1 when new employees start, right? And so what does that look like? It's assuming historical data and roll-up values to see, okay, well, in the past we've seen an increase of new enrollees maybe in first grade, and are they being homeschooled, or are they doing private kinder and whatnot? So we look at like 5 years of historical data to make our projections, and then come April when we open enrollment, we start to kind of make those necessary adjustments based on the trend that we're seeing in Skyward. And then sometimes we have to make those decisions that, okay, based on this, we have X amount of seats left in 5th grade. we're either going to add a unit, which would be a teacher, a full-time equivalent, so we call it an FTE or a unit. We're going to add that unit now based on historical data. September 1, we're always going to have new students or something of that nature, right? And then we'll make that adjustment in a timely fashion, generally by June, to ensure that we can find an experienced teacher. So we are literally monitoring and discussing it week to week at our cabinet level meetings, which is all of our district leadership. We just had some conversations the other day as what does 5th grade look like, and class sizes, is that going to be our focus this year? And if we're focusing at the secondary level, we need to go back to the elementary level and look at that too, and vice versa, right? Thinking about if that is our goal is to lower class sizes, to have more intimate settings in the classroom to allow for students to have space, right, and not be crowded, and just also the workload on the teacher. So we're thinking through so many different scenarios when we're looking at projections, at whether or not we need to hire, we need to find a room, is there facility modifications that have to take place. There's so many voices there because the impact really touches every department that goes into, starting that school year.
Absolutely.
And then we're sharing it with the district leadership team, which shares it with principals to get back to their campuses to make them aware of what we're doing.
Perfect, I love that. So, where do you see districts falling short in recruitment right now?
So I would say that this year has been very different than what it's been the last few years since COVID in all reality. I feel like prior to COVID, you probably didn't see the number of postings that you're seeing in education that you see now. And I would say that our turnover seems a little less than where we were last year at this time, but last year around this time we were looking at a lot of administrative positions. However, this year we're noticing that a lot of surrounding districts are doing rifts and layoffs. So I think how that's impacting us is it's growing our applicant pool. So we're able to fill positions fairly, I wouldn't say easy by any means, but with really quality candidates. And that's not always been an easy thing to do. In the past, we've had to post online specifically for secondary core content areas like math, science, English can be hard to fill. Social studies with individuals that are truly certified, right? Not having to utilize your district of innovation, which you're no longer allowed to do anyways, or special education, because oftentimes surrounding districts are providing stipends specifically for our sped teachers, which we don't have currently. We're looking into it, but those are the areas that we've kind of had a shortfall as a district previously, is having quality candidate pools and enough, because sometimes by the time we get to them, they're either interviewing somewhere else and we don't have the salary that meets and aligns with the district of where they've also interviewed with. So I would say this year is that we have built our pool based on other districts slimming up their campus staffing. Currently, like a lot of coaches are being eliminated, or coaches across the board at CCISD. So we have really solid candidates, and there's another district that's trimming in special education. And so we have great candidates coming from that district. So I don't want to see it as like a positive thing. These people are, losing their jobs by any means, but we're getting really quality staff and applicants because of that.
It definitely is a positive to have experienced teachers and make sure they're certified, because I know in some districts that they're hiring people that aren't certified, or that has been a problem in the past where they're having to count on them to get it. And so I think with our district being able to get those quality candidates,
Oh, absolutely.
it does stink, but it's good for us too.
No, absolutely. Well, this year they released in legislation that you are not allowed to use your district of innovation for core content areas. So in order to maintain them in their employment moving forward into the 26-27 school year, we had to actually apply for delay of teacher certification. And so we had to lay out a full plan on how we were going to ensure all teachers were fully certified in the next 3 years. And so we've done that, and each year you have to decrease that number. So this year we were at 11 or 12, I'm sorry, and then going into the school year we can only have 9. And so we've done a really great job, and we have a lot of follow-up and processes in place, but we're limited, right? So again, you're correct in the fact that having applicants that are fully certified and that come with knowledge, that can bring knowledge to our district, is great.
I love that. So what do you look for beyond certifications and experience when selecting candidates?
Sometimes it's just the presentation of what they're attaching, right? Whether it's their resume or they have a portfolio. And truly, their references are the biggest thing. We have a very generic reference form, right? And sometimes, dependent on the position, but if it's a high-level position, we'll begin calling references prior to selecting for an interview if our applicant pool is somewhat slim, just to ensure that we're, posting to meet the right candidate, if you will. So does there need to be an adjustment to the job description or the title and whatnot? So we'll start making adjustments based on the applicant pool that we have to determine whether or not we need to make those tweaks and everything. But I would say that what they provide in form of like a cover letter or a resume just shows how much time and effort they're willing to put into your application process, and maybe that's sometimes what you end up getting from them as an employee as well. So sometimes people may not complete their employment history within the application, and they only attach their resume. So it's those little things like that of just taking the time to be detail oriented, because that's the purpose of the application. Maybe something's working with your computer or not working with your computer that day, and you can't pull up a PDF or something, right?
Absolutely.
But you have their employment history within the application because it's completed. That's a benefit. So
yes. I love that. So how do you ensure hiring practices lead to both strong instruction and good campus culture fits?
Okay, so oftentimes the interview process is taking place at the campus, and I'm removed from that. So it's a paraprofessional or a teacher. When they make their recommendation, they're confirming who was on the panel, who they interviewed, what references were checked, and I don't know if I said this already, the questions that were asked. And so I always look at that in detail, and then I pull their application and all their attachments, and I look at that as well. I often know the need based on conversations with campus administration, and then sometimes I may push back based on what I'm seeing in a reference, just to confirm that we're both seeing the same thing. And then oftentimes in the recommendations we receive, there's a lot of excitement as to why they're the best fit. So if it's something that may be missing in that email for recommendation, I'll then reach out to them. And then from there, once I receive it, I'm actually not the final stop. Mr. Rohr, for example, if it's a teacher, he approves all teachers before we put their name on our board agenda. And so oftentimes every time I'm reshaping like a bio for that individual we're making a hire for, and then he may have some questions coming back to me of, so they have this experience there. What does this look like? What does that look like? Kind of thing. And then we'll do a little bit more digging. But it's just kind of fully shaping and trying to get to know who this person is, and ensuring that the superintendent even has that information before hire.
I love that. So what does effective onboarding look like in our district, and how do you support teachers past their first year? Or how do you support the administrators supporting the teachers, probably?
So it's really a partnership amongst multiple departments. So when I say that is upon hire, we're doing all the paperwork, all the kind of like boring things in HR until we get to our new hire orientation. And our new hire orientation, they're getting their devices, they're taking their badge pictures, they're completing all their paperwork that we may not have already received. Like I-9s have to be completed in person, and we have our post-employment affidavit they complete in person and notarize. Then we review over board policy, educator code of ethics, all of those things. But then from there, they're kind of released into the district, right, into their campus, and they're assigned a mentor. They're then working alongside the coaches, and again, it's that layered effect that we talked about in that first question of ensuring that you are fully aware of all of the resources you have. Instructional technology at our new employee orientation kind of shares with them the hub that we have with some tutorials on Canvas and all the learning management systems. And then there's a lot of check-in points. So there's check-in points not just through our T-test evaluation process, but through mentors and our curriculum department. Team leads as well, too.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. How do you balance accountability with growth when evaluating staff? So kind of that evaluation piece, I think. So all of the teachers are on T-test, right, at all levels. So how do you balance like accountability with growth, or how does a district rather?
So, well, I could look at that from multiple perspectives. From like a teacher, we're looking at balancing that. Well, you always recognize that you could go in a classroom and they could be having a bad day. So it's allowing for a reset, for you to come back. There could be some student behavior, something that's creating distractions of sort. We're also evaluating, now that we have TIA, it's even more of a focus, that student growth measure. So you could see you have a really quality teacher, but there's something missing here, what can we do? And then it's bringing in coaches and scheduling that different, that additional time. So that's really how we would evaluate a teacher, is looking at their student growth measure along with their current walkthroughs and everything to ensure that they're equitable and they calibrate, right, across the board. That's been a focus for us with TIA. But then when you think through like the technology department, well, we may have a help desk system and we have data that we're collecting and tickets. And so what's your performance look like? Are we getting feedback from campuses? And it's all of that we would utilize in their end of year review. Or we may be on a quarterly review as they're a new hire, just to see best ways that we can support them and ensure that they're successful with our individuals and within our building. Sometimes it's a hire, we're doing some training, it's a 30-day follow-up. What does it look like? What are your needs? Of course, there's always that, hey, I'm here whenever you have a question, send me an email, pop into my office. But then it's just those 30, 60, 90-day follow-ups.
I love that. So that
learning.
The plan that y'all have in place is, y'all already have those like built-in check-ins, like even for the different roles. I love that.
Yeah.
So when performance rises, concerns arise, how do you ensure the process is both fair for the teacher and focused on student needs? I know that you probably, it's been a long time since you're the executive director now, but like from an administrative role, I guess maybe like when does it work its way to you? Is that when there is like a dispute with maybe like how it's being handled at a campus level, and like when would you intervene in a like could be a dismissal process?
Okay, so we have board policy that allows for opportunities for staff to take it like a grievance route.
Yes.
And so what that would mean is you don't agree with something that's taken place and you're requesting a remedy, so a solution, and you lay out what that remedy is to that problem that you're specifying. That could look like various things, but let's say it's in regards to an employee that's performance isn't aligning with what the campus administrator thinks it should be. So they're saying, hey, I'm gonna recommend a non-renewal, and they're like, wait, hold on, I don't feel like I have the necessary documentation for that. We haven't had these conversations maybe. From the employee side, the employee has a right to file a grievance or come to HR at any time, right? And so in that situation, let's say we received a grievance, we always will try to resolve a grievance informally, but sometimes that could just be me sitting in a meeting and saying, hey, let's mediate a conversation to see if we can get there. But if we can't, then we're gonna move it to a grievance and we're gonna move it to a more formal process. It's somewhat similar to like that mediation, but it can't be that back and forth conversation, if you will. The grievance is set up to where you have a hearing officer, the hearing officer introduces everybody, lays out and reads aloud the information provided in the grievance documentation received. And then they say, party A, you will have 12 minutes to share what you'd like to share related to what this grievance is considering, and then party B, you will have 12 minutes. If I have any questions throughout it, I may ask those to seek further clarification. Then once that's meeting's complete, again, there's no cross-examination or anything like that, then the hearing officer has a period of days where they have to respond in writing of their findings.
Okay.
Then, if they don't agree with that, it can go to the next level. There's 3 levels. Generally, it always starts with the first line, so the first administrator that can truly provide that remedy. So let's say that it's a paraprofessional, that the principal is saying, sorry, but you're no longer a great fit for this district and I am releasing you from employment. We would say that maybe because the principal's involved, that level 1 grievance would be heard by me. If it's a teacher and there's an issue there, we may start it immediately at a level 2, which is always the superintendent. Level 3 is the board. So that's really the formal process. I'm generally always going to be made aware of a situation before it gets there, and so whether the employees reach out to me or a principal's reached out to me, so we can start like working through what does that look like, how can we, you know, I'm going in as a resource for everyone and a support for everyone. So always presuming positive intent is super important in HR and ensuring that you know each individual's story.
I love that. And I will say, like, you've been so supportive, and with, I think, like, even things on our campus that have come up, even just having our administrators be like, okay, like, this is, you know, having those conversations, like, okay, let me check in with Lindsay to just ensure that we're doing the correct process. It's always so nice to know, like, okay, there's that support system when needed, to just offer some advice of like, okay, this, or, you know, I think is great, because it doesn't need to be you that steps in, but also like to have that resource of having to make sure that we're like following the correct steps, and not necessarily always necessarily with personnel, but like even with other things that come up. And so, not to get into any specifics, but yes, no, thank you. I mean, it's amazing to know that our principal or assistant principal or whoever, or we could just call and you answer that to support us in that way. So if you could change one aspect of personnel management and public education, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. I wish we almost had a little bit more flexibility in education, being that we are a public entity. There is a line of approval processes and all the things. Like, I think Chapter 21 contracts are a beautiful thing, but they can hinder us at times, right? I think our limitations on budget and what's considered a gift of public funds can hinder us at times, right? We have the non-teaching professional payout that we just got approved by the board. But instead of saying we want to pay all non-teaching professionals that gap from where they were pulled from the teacher salary schedule based on teacher retention allotment, so it's generally around $3,500, we want to pay that gap to everybody that missed out on it this year.
Absolutely.
But we can't, because it wasn't in our original salary plan as adopted by the board, so it would be considered a gift of public funds, unless we frame it as a retention tool and they have to return next year. So you're really hurting those valuable educators that are choosing to retire this year. They don't get it, and that feels really yucky. So there's a lot of things like that that I wish I could change. That's just very difficult. You know, the passing of a bond, but I recognize the piece and the necessity in that, because school districts could easily overspend. And I think it's great to give our voters, and I mean, I'm a community member, a right to voice in what's going on in the education system. But there's pieces to it that make me a little sad too. Yeah. You know, when we watch our some of our athletes that can't practice every day and don't get that benefit like other districts do. It's just the impact that things like that have on students overall. As a community member and as a mom, make me sad. But I recognize the purpose of it, and I recognize the good it does. It just sometimes it hinders us a bit. So
I agree. I think, is there anything that I didn't ask that you feel like maybe I should have, or that I would need to know as a future administrator?
You know, I think it's a beautiful thing that we have a lot of people in society that are still looking in the direction of wanting to stay in education. So I'm excited for you in that sense for sure. I would just want to say there's no other questions or anything. I wouldn't want you to get discouraged because sometimes, sitting in the classroom is really hard. I sit at home with 2 kids, right? And having the patience and the flexibility and the grace every day with the amount of parents and people that you work with along with your kids and meeting their needs, it's great. And it takes a lot of heart and skill to be able to sit in that role. And for administrators, you're kind of like, you're being removed from that somewhat. And it feels very negative all the time. Like there's no individual celebration. So I would just want you to know, like when you think about that and you sit in those scenarios, once you sit in that role of recognizing all this work that you've done to get there and not be discouraged along the way. Because sometimes you can think, you're like, oh my gosh, like I recognize my purpose, but it all feels heavy, and I think that education as a whole feels heavy. I think you feel it at the teacher level. I think you're, like a summer break. It's like, it's never long enough, right? But it can give you a reset. But when you become an administrator, there's no time. Your summer is crazy. But just remember that all your work got you that far, and to not carry that every day. Because you gotta learn, like it takes time. You gotta learn to say, okay, I'm gonna leave that here and I'm gonna move on to the next thing, because I think that to be in education, you gotta be passionate and you gotta love kids, and you carry that into leadership, and you just start adding all the people into it,
I know. I feel like the further you get, sometimes the further removed it feels, even though you're like, I'm surrounded by them all day and in so many capacities, but it's very different. So it's hard to even, they're like, oh, when are you gonna start applying for principals and assistant principals? And I'm like, well, I know that's eventually what I would like to do, but like, I don't feel done in the classroom yet by any means either. And so it's, and when you, even like in the coaches role sometimes, I think, it's unique because they get to go into so many different rooms and see so many kids, but just really having that like daily interaction with the same kids, I can see how that they would miss it, and so but yeah, I think there's probably some benefits of some of it, but like more than anything, like you said, you are dealing with so much more of that administrative and kind of managerial side, even like of the paperwork and task. So thank you so much for taking the time and being with me, and I'm excited. There's so much to learn between that. That's
yes, absolutely. Well, hey, if there's anything along the way from even